The Romance of the Three Kingdoms is a classic. Grand battles, endless drama, cool characters, lots of valuable lessons. The only issue is it's way too long, with 120 chapters. The adapted movies usually run 100 episodes. So in this series, I'll condense it into 3 video episodes. Of course, many details and characters will be left out, but you'll definitely get the main events of the Three Kingdoms after this series. Now let's get started. In the final years of the Eastern Han Dynasty, the emperor only trusted eunuchs, so the government was in chaos. The economy collapsed and the people were starving. Desperate, 3 brothers from a Chinese wizarding family started a rebellion. They often wore yellow headbands, so they were called the Yellow Turbans. At this point, the Han army was so weak they couldn't resist, so they posted an ad looking for freelancers to help. This part of the story is mainly to introduce the characters, because the major players all show up and make a name for themselves during this rebellion. Like the trio of Liu, Guan, and Zhong, Liu Bei, a sandal vendor, but a distant relative of the emperor who's pretty much untouchable, Guan Yu, a bean seller, and Zhang Fei, a butcher. These 3 hit it off and decided to become sworn brothers under the peach tree, then joined the army together. There's also Cao Cao, the master of betrayal, a foster nephew of a powerful eunuch, and Sun Jian, the fierce tiger of the East, a descendant of Sun Tzu. Liu Bei, Cao Cao, and Sun Jian are the 3 who lay the foundation for the Three Kingdoms. However, even after quelling the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the root of the problem remained. It was the 10 corrupt eunuchs known as the 10 regular attendants. This group had an anti-faction led by the queen's brother, He Jin, along with Cao Cao and his old classmate, Yuan Shao, a man with a family legacy of 3 generations serving in high positions. Though they managed to place He Jin's nephew, Emperor Shao, on the throne, they didn't know what to do next. So, He Jin came up with a bold move. He called in a general from the borderlands, Dong Zhuo, to bring his army to the capital. The eunuchs saw this sudden large army appearing out of nowhere and immediately knew something was up, leading to chaos in the palace, and they ambushed and killed He Jin. Cao Cao and Yuan Shao tried to charge in and kill the eunuchs, but it was too late. A few had escaped, taking the emperor and his brother as hostages. These eunuchs later perished in the ensuing chaos, while the emperor's 2 brothers got lost in the forest, where Dong Zhuo found them. This allowed Dong Zhuo to quickly gain a huge advantage and seize control of the court. The emperor's younger brother, Liu Xie, was more intelligent and bold than the older one, and Dong Zhuo liked him, so he wanted to replace the elder brother with the younger one. But another high-ranking official, Ding Yuan, opposed this, leading to a confrontation between the 2. Dong Zhuo lost the battle despite being a skilled warrior, simply because Ding Yuan had a legendary general on his side, Lu Bu, the adopted son of Ding Yuan. However, in the end, the adopted son turned out to be a traitor. Lu Bu betrayed and killed Ding Yuan in the middle of the night, all for a bit of money and a horse. But to be fair, it was Xiliang's famous steed, the Red Hare, the finest horse in the Three Kingdoms. With Lu Bu by his side, Dong Zhuo became the real power. He killed the emperor and the empress dowager, then placed Liu Xi on the throne as Emperor Xian of Han. Of course, the new emperor was just a puppet, and Dong Zhuo held all the real power. There were a few officials who opposed Dong Zhuo, but they were too afraid to act because of Lu Bu. So Cao Cao stepped up and said, "Leave it to me." Cao Cao borrowed the famous 7-star sword from the Minister of Works, Wang Dun, and went to confront Dong Zhuo while he was taking a nap. Cao Cao drew the sword but was caught by Dong Zhuo before he could strike. So he pretended to offer the sword to Dong Zhuo and then quickly fled the capital. It took a while for Dong Zhuo to realize he had been almost assassinated and sent people after him. A local official, Chen Gong, captured Cao Cao, but after hearing his explanation, decided to join him and escape together. They later met a family friend of Cao Cao's who let them stay at his place. At this point, Cao Cao was being hunted and he was paranoid. When he overheard the family discussing butchering a pig, he thought they were planning to kill him. So he killed the entire family to be safe. When he saw the pig, he felt embarrassed and justified the act by saying, "I'd rather betray others than let them betray me." Chen Gong was disgusted by this and left Cao Cao. Cao Cao went back to his hometown alone and posted an ad looking for allies. Thus, the 18 warlords united into an alliance to oppose Dong Zhuo. Yuan Shao was elected as the leader because of his influential background. It seemed like an easy win, 18 against 1, but when they reached the Yishui Pass, they were stopped by Dong Zhuo's general, Hua Xiong, who challenged them to a one-on-one duel. One by one, the allied generals accepted the challenge but were all killed. Just when it seemed no one would dare to face Huaxiong, Guan Yu volunteered. At this point, Guan Yu was still relatively unknown, so he had to insist, "If I lose, you must behead my brother before I go out to fight." Cao Cao was so impressed by his confidence that he poured him a cup of warm wine. Guan Yu said, "Wait here." Then he rushed out and decapitated Huaxiong. He came back to the camp before the wine had even cooled down. But Huaxiong was just a minor boss. The main boss was Lu Bu at the Hulao Pass. The allied army was trampled like mosquitoes by Lu Bu's forces. Gong Sun, the leader of Liu Bei's group, was chased down by Lu Bu like a chicken. Fortunately, Zhang Fei charged out to save him. Zhang Fei was strong but not enough to match Lu Bu, so Guan Yu jumped in to help. Liu Bei also rushed in to join the fight, trying to show he was useful. With the three of them attacking together, Lu Bu eventually got tired and retreated to rest, but it still looked like the allied forces had won, so their morale was high. At this point, Dong Zhuo realized he couldn't win, so he decided to burn down the capital, Luoyang, and move to Chang'an, the old capital of the Western Han Dynasty. When the allied forces arrived, Luoyang was reduced to nothing but ruins. One of Yuan Shu's generals, Sun Jian, found the imperial jade seal in a well. The rumor spread, and this caused the already tense alliance to fall apart. Only Cao Cao was determined to continue the fight against Dong Zhuo, but he was ambushed and had to retreat. Everyone else went their separate ways. Sun Jian returned to his hometown in Changsha, but Yuan Shao coveted the jade seal and ordered Liu Biao to stop Sun Jian. Sun Jian was lured into an ambush by Liu Biao and killed. His 17-year-old son, Sun Si, had to take charge of the family. Though still young, Sun Si was smart enough to call for a ceasefire and lay low, waiting for the right moment. After the alliance dissolved, everything devolved into warlordism. Local lords ruled like kings and fought each other for control. Even leaders like Yuan Shao turned their armies on Gongsun Zan. Gongsun Zan, aside from Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei, also had Zhao Yun, who made his first appearance here. Meanwhile, Dong Zhuo seemed to have secured his position, but Wang Yun had other plans. Wang Yun had a beautiful adopted daughter, Diao Chan, whom he promised to marry to Lu Bu, then offered her to Dong Zhuo. He also slyly told Lu Bu that Dong Zhuo had stolen her from him. Lu Bu, now furious, betrayed his adoptive father and killed him. All for a woman. It's pretty crazy. Heroes of the world undone by a pretty face. The people of Chang'an celebrated Dong Zhuo's death. They stuck a wick in his belly button and lit it, making him burn like a torch. The fire lasted for days because Dong Zhuo was so fat. However, a power vacuum was created. Dong Zhuo's men rushed back to Chang'an to claim their share of the power. At this point, Lu Bu sided with Wang Yun and went out to block the enemies. But he was strong in body but simple in mind. He was lured far away and had his supply lines cut off from within the city. So, Lu Bu had to flee. Meanwhile, the duo of Liru and Guosi rose to power. They killed Wang Yun and plotted to dethrone the emperor and establish their own dynasty. However, the warlords, despite their control, still operated under the banner of the Han dynasty. The positions and powers they held still required imperial approval. If not, they'd be seen as rebels and would be hunted down by all. So anyone who wanted to overthrow the dynasty had to gradually eliminate the emperor's influence over time. There were also other concerns, like the return of the Yellow Turban Army. For this, Liru ordered Cao Cao to handle the situation. Cao Cao's campaign was a massive success, capturing 300,000 Yellow Turban soldiers and selecting the best ones to recruit into his own army. His influence grew rapidly, turning Yuanzhou into his new base of operations. He even invited his father, Cao Teng, to visit and show off his achievements. The governor of Shuzhou, Cao Xian, wanted to make peace with Cao Cao, so he sent a personal guard for Cao Teng. Little did he know, the guard was a former Yellow Turban soldier with a grudge. He stole everything and massacred Cao Cao's family, enraging Cao Cao and prompting him to march against Cao Xian. Cao Xian called for help from Kong Rong, the chancellor of Beihai, but Kong Rong was busy, so he outsourced the task to Liu Bei, who was still a low-ranking official at the time. Liu Bei managed to sneak through Cao Cao's army to reach Cao Xian. But facing Cao Cao's large force head-on was suicidal, so Liu Bei sent a letter asking Cao Cao to retreat. And Cao Cao did retreat, though no one understood why. The real reason was that Lu Bu had sabotaged Cao Cao's base, forcing him to return. But the people of Shuzhou thought Liu Bei had been responsible, so when Cao Xian died, Liu Bei was promoted to governor. Now, as for Lu Bu, after being kicked out of Chang'an, he wandered around, hopping from job to job, but was hated everywhere he went. Eventually, he teamed up with Zhang Miao to attack Cao Cao. But now, with Chen Gong backing his lack of strategy, Lu Bu was much more cautious. Even Cao Cao got caught in an ambush and had to retreat in a hurry. However, Cao Cao's strength remained superior, and after a series of back-and-forth battles, he managed to drive Lu Bu away. Lu Bu, out of options, fled to Liu Bei. Liu Bei knew that if not for Lu Bu, he would have never escaped Cao Cao before, so he welcomed him, despite Zhang Fei's objections. Meanwhile, Cao Cao was riding high on good fortune. Li Ru and Guo Si had started fighting among themselves, and Emperor Xian sent a letter for help. Cao Cao then rushed to the ruins of Luoyang, where he found protection from the general Xu Huang. This not only allowed Cao Cao to secure the emperor, but also added another strong general to his ranks. Having the emperor in his hands was like using a cheat code in a game. Cao Cao could order anything. The first thing he did was appoint Liu Bei as the official governor of Xuzhou with the condition that he must kill Lu Bu. Just then, Lu Bu showed up and invited Liu Bei out for drinks. When Zhang Fei saw Lu Bu, he immediately jumped in to attack. Though Liu Bei stopped him in time and said he didn't intend to let Cao Cao manipulate him, the rift between Liu Bei and Lu Bu had begun. Later, Cao Cao ordered Liu Bei to attack Yuan Shu. Liu Bei, unable to disobey the emperor's orders, reluctantly agreed, leaving Zhang Fei in charge of their base. Before leaving, Liu Bei made Zhang Fei promise not to drink any alcohol. But Zhang Fei, being Zhang Fei, got drunk and fought with Lu Bu. Lu Bu ended up beating him so badly that Zhang Fei had to flee Xuzhou. Liu Bei didn't blame his brother, but now they had enemies on both sides. This part is pretty complicated because no one really understands what Lu Bu was thinking. When Yuan Shu tricked Lu Bu into fighting Liu Bei, Lu Bu ended up accepting Liu Bei as his subordinate. Liu Bei, reluctantly agreeing, knew it was the only way to survive. On Yuan Shu's side, Sun Jian's son, Sun Ci, was also dissatisfied and no longer wanted to serve Yuan Shu. He traded the Imperial Jade Seal for 3,000 soldiers and 500 horses, claiming he was going south to settle a score with Liu Dao. Yuan Shu, not the sharpest tool in the shed, agreed. So Sun Ce, along with his sworn brother Zhou Yu, headed south and captured a large territory in Jiangdong. From then on, the 20-year-old Sun Ce became known as the Little Overlord. Up north, Yuan Shu was still clashing with Liu Bei. He sent gifts to Lu Bu, hoping he would ignore Liu Bei, but Lu Bu rejected the offer. Not one to give up, Yuan Shu asked Lu Bu to marry his daughter to his son. Lu Bu was considering it when he received word that Zhang Fei had stolen his horse. Furious, Lu Bu immediately turned on Liu Bei and attacked him. This forced Liu Bei to seek refuge with Cao Cao. Meanwhile, Cao Cao faced his own trouble. Cao Cao was notorious for his love of women, especially those who were already married. He had just recruited a new general, Zhang Xu. Unfortunately, Zhang Xu's uncle had recently passed away, and Cao Cao had an affair with Zhang Xu's aunt, which deeply insulted Zhang Xu. Angry and betrayed, Zhang Xu plotted an ambush against Cao Cao. Cao Cao managed to escape, but he had to sacrifice his loyal bodyguard, Dian Wei, and his eldest son, Cao Ong. Zhang Xu, defeated, had to flee to Liu Biao's territory. At this moment, Yuan Shu went mad and declared himself emperor. As I've mentioned, the Han Emperor was still alive, so this move was incredibly foolish. Now, everyone turned against Yuan Shu, Lu Bu, Cao Cao, and even Sun Ce, all marched to strike him down. In this campaign, Cao Cao managed to broker peace between Liu Bei and Lu Bu. Afterward, he received even more good news. Li Ru and Guo Si were killed by their own men, and these men also came to submit to Cao Cao. Now that Cao Cao had dealt with Lu Bu, he immediately called in Liu Bei's people. However, the plan got exposed, and Lu Bu struck first, attacking Liu Bei. Liu Bei lost track of his brothers and had to flee to Cao Cao's side. Now there's one detail I don't want to overlook. On his way, Liu Bei met a hunter named Liu An, who invited him to share a meal. However, Liu An had no rice, so he had to cook his wife to serve Liu Bei. When Liu Bei realized what had happened, he could only weep and thank Liu An before leaving. Later, when Cao Cao heard about this, he rewarded Liu An with gold for his loyalty. It may sound strange, but this was seen as a lesson in civic duty about loyalty. In many Chinese legends, characters often sacrifice their loved ones for greater causes. Sometimes the line between evil and loyalty isn't so clear. Back to Lu Bu, it was obvious that he was great at one-on-one combat, but his strategy was lacking. So he could only lock himself up in his fortress, holding out for months. However, northern Chinese soldiers were often not skilled swimmers. When the floods came, Cao Cao blocked the river, flooding the city. Lu Bu's soldiers couldn't withstand it, so they had to surrender their leader to Cao Cao. Chen Gong, ever the honorable man, accepted execution, but Lu Bu cried and begged for mercy, offering to serve Cao Cao like a beast of burden. But Liu Bei, standing behind, whispered, "Don't trust this guy." So Cao Cao executed Lu Bu. One of Lu Bu's generals, Zhang Liao, was spared by Liu Bei and Guan Yu, as he was seen as a good man, or at least that's the story. History would later show that Zhang Liao became one of the greatest generals of the Wei Kingdom, but that's a story for later. For now, we're talking about the end of Lu Bu. The Chinese have a saying, Lu Bu among men, red hair among horses. Both Lu Bu and the famous horse, Red Hair, were the best in their fields. But no matter how strong you are, if you keep stabbing people in the back, you'll eventually get taken down. The lesson here is, if you want to succeed, don't be a scumbag. You can be cunning, but don't be despicable. After defeating Lu Bu, Cao Cao became the #1 power on the server. But like any warlord, he had his ambitions, and so did Cao Cao. Although Emperor Xian was powerless, he wasn't dumb. He wrote a decree to counter Cao Cao's influence and hid it in his belt, giving it to his father-in-law Dong Cheng to build a team. One standout member of the team was Liu Bei. Though his lineage was recognized, he was still confined in Xuchang, because Cao Cao had realized Liu Bei's ambitions. During a drinking session, Cao Cao said to Liu Bei, "The only heroes in this world are you and me." Liu Bei knew then that he had to escape as soon as possible. So he asked Cao Cao for permission to go clean up Yuan Shu's remnants. Fortunately, Cao Cao agreed. However, Yuan Shu didn't die at Liu Bei's hands. He starved to death because he couldn't eat the food his soldiers provided. Yuan Shu's last request before dying was to have a feast worth 800,000. But, of course, his soldiers didn't have that kind of luxury. Liu Bei, having completed the task, didn't return to Cao Cao, but instead, he took control of his old territory in Suzhou. After that, Liu Bei invited Yuan Shao to join him in fighting Cao Cao, following the emperor's orders. Yuan Shao hired a content creator to publish a scandal about Cao Cao, listing a series of his brutal acts and crimes, including holding the emperor hostage. As a well-known figure himself, Yuan Shao's influence in this media battle had a significant impact, forcing Cao Cao to spend a lot of time and resources rebuilding his image. For example, Cao Cao even had to make concessions to Zhang Xu, despite Zhang Xu having killed Cao Cao's bodyguard and eldest son. He also tried to form an alliance with Liu Biao, but that didn't work out either. Fortunately, Cao Cao's chronic migraines led him to uncover a doctor who was attempting to poison him. This eventually led him to Dong Cheng and the emperor's decree. Cao Cao then executed all the conspirators he found within the palace. One of the people Cao Cao discovered was Liu Bei, so he immediately set out to attack him, striking quickly before Liu Bei could become a bigger threat. At this point, Liu Bei, of course, couldn't match Cao Cao's power. Yuan Shao was busy taking care of his sick child, so he couldn't send reinforcements. Liu Bei was quickly overwhelmed and had to flee for his life. Liu Bei himself went missing, leaving only Guan Yu behind to protect his 2 sister-in-laws. Fortunately, Cao Cao had long admired Guan Yu, so he ordered that Guan Yu be spared and sent Zhang Liao to persuade him to surrender. At first, Guan Yu was ready to fight to the death, but Zhang Liao gently said, "Hey buddy, if you die, who's going to look after your sister-in-laws?" So Guan Yu agreed to surrender, but with 3 conditions. First, he would only serve the Han Emperor, not the Cao Cao. Second, he would arrange security for his sister-in-laws. Third, he could leave whenever he received news of Liu Bei. Though it sounded a bit unreasonable, Cao Cao, who had already become infatuated with Guan Yu, agreed to the terms. After that, Cao Cao did everything he could to win Guan Yu's favor, offering him wealth, status, a palace in Royal City, and even a Porsche. Oh, I mean the red hair horse. But despite all this, Guan Yu remained loyal to Liu Bei. However, that didn't mean Guan Yu didn't feel some sense of duty to Cao Cao. During the major northern battle between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao, Yuan Shao's general Yan Liang had killed several of Cao Cao's top generals, and even pushed back Cao Cao's forces, including Xu Huang. So, Guan Yu personally went to the battlefield and beheaded Yan Liang with a single strike. Right after that, another general from Yuan Shao's side, Wen Shu, went into battle. Cao Cao set up an ambush and trapped Wen Shu, but Wen Shu managed to push back Zhang Lo and Xu Huang before escaping. At that moment, Guan Yu, riding his red hair, quickly chased Wen Shu down. He laughed and said, "Where are you going, my friend?" before striking him down with one blow. With the loss of 2 powerful generals, Yuan Shao's army suffered a severe blow to its morale. Just then, the Yellow Turban Army rose up again in Ruyang. Guan Yu was tasked with handling it. He learned that Liu Bei was with Yuan Shao in this campaign, and the Yellow Turbans were actually sent by Yuan Shao and Liu Bei to capture Ruyang. So Guan Yu pretended to chase them, but in reality, he allowed them to retreat. When he returned to Xuchang to report, he received a secret letter from Liu Bei, confirming that Liu Bei was still alive. Guan Yu decided to leave. Cao Cao had already given his word, so he had to let Guan Yu go. Otherwise, it would make him look like a man of broken promises and ruin his reputation. However, Cao Cao's subordinates didn't see it that way, so Guan Yu had to fight his way through 5 passes and defeat 6 generals to reunite with his brother. This part was adapted into many movies and plays, but unfortunately, there's no RPG version of it, which would have been amazing. Basically, Guan Yu recruited people on his journey as he went. When heading north, he picked up Liu Hua, a longtime fan from the Yellow Turban Army. By the time he reached Yuan Shao's camp, Liu Bei had already gone to Ruyang. When Guan Yu returned to Ruyang, he recruited another old fan, Chu Chao, and coincidentally reunited with his brother Zhang Fei. Zhang Fei scolded him like a dog, thinking that Guan Yu had truly surrendered to Cao Cao. Just then, a Cao Cao general, Sai Yang, caught up with Guan Yu. So Guan Yu immediately killed Sai Yang to prove to Zhang Fei that he was still loyal. They reconciled and continued on to Ruyang. Soon, they learned that Liu Bei had returned to Yuan Shao's camp for a meeting. The whole group turned back north and finally caught up with Liu Bei. Yes, this emotional journey was really just a back-and-forth chase, but the true treasure was finding friends along the way. By this point, Liu Bei had decided to leave Yuan Shao because Yuan Shao was too indecisive. To be fair, this was how Liu Bei managed to survive after Guan Yu killed Yan Liang and Wen Shu. But in the end, it's better to rely on yourself. So Liu Bei, Guan Yu, and Zhang Fei split off again, no longer following anyone. Before leaving, Guan Yu adopted Guan Ping, the son of a farmer. While traveling, he reunited with Zhao Yun, who had been wandering ever since the death of his lord, Gong Sunzan. Liu Bei invited Zhao Yun to join their group and set up camp in Ruyang. Now, Yuan Shao had to work hard to find new allies in the south. Liu Biao refused, but Sun Ce was on board. Si thought Cao Cao was playing dirty by not promoting him, so he wanted revenge. However, before he could mobilize his forces, a Chinese sorcerer, Wu Qi, appeared. Sun Ce considered him to be a practitioner of dark arts and ordered his execution. But Wu Qi kept resurrecting, which stressed Sun Ce out so much that he died first. After Sun Ce's death, his younger brother Sun Quan took over. Quan advocated for a peaceful relationship with Cao Cao and disregarded Yuan Shao, aiming to give the Sun family more time to build their own empire. Eventually, the biggest battle between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao at Guandu arrived. Shao had an enormous army, about the size of the combined populations of 4 districts of Hanoi, 700,000 soldiers. Cao Cao's army, however, was just a tenth of Shao's. Before the fight began, the two sides engaged in a war of words, as was customary. Shao used an imperial edict to accuse Cao Cao of being a rebel, to which Cao Cao retorted, calling Shao the true rebel. After a bit of verbal sparring with no resolution, they decided to fight. Cao Cao was ambushed by archers as soon as he entered the battlefield and had to retreat. He then switched to a defensive counter-offensive strategy, creating a stone-throwing machine to counter the archers and digging trenches around his camp to defend against special forces. But even with these measures, his troops were running out of food, and Yuan Shao's forces weren't doing any better, as the main problem was their leader. Despite capturing a messenger from Cao Cao and learning that Cao's army was running out of supplies, Yuan Shao thought it was a trap, and did nothing. With my 20 years of strategy game experience, I believe if Yuan Shao had split his forces into 2, one to attack Xuchang and rescue Emperor Xian, and the other to hold Cao Cao at Guandu, Yuan Shao could have won, and history would have been very different. It's so frustrating when the commander is incompetent. Some of Yuan Shao's subordinates defected and told Cao Cao the location of Shao's food storage. Without hesitation, Cao Cao sent his troops to burn it down. Yuan Shao, confused, split his army into 2, a small group to guard the food storage and a large one to attack Cao Cao's camp. This was the moment Cao Cao showed his tactical brilliance. He attacked the smaller group first, spread fake news to Yuan Shao, making him think the food storage was secure, and then pressured Shao's main forces into a sandwich position. In the end, Cao Cao captured and subdued one of Yuan Shao's top generals, Zhang Ka, while Yuan Shao's forces were crushed and forced to flee. Cao Cao didn't let up and chase them all the way back. Yuan Shao only escaped because Liu Bei attacked Xuchang. Cao Cao had to pull back, but didn't confront Liu Bei directly. Instead, he went around to attack Liu Bei's stronghold at Runan, forcing Liu Bei to retreat to Liu Biao's territory. With this winning streak, Cao Cao's dominance in the north seemed inevitable. Yuan Shao passed away 2 years later, leaving behind a territory torn apart by his sons fighting for succession. Cao Cao wiped out all 3 sons in one swift move. Interestingly, Cao Cao's son, Cao Pi, inherited his father's fascination with married women, and so he took Yuan Shao's daughter-in-law, Yuan Si's second wife, as his own. At the time, Cao Cao still hadn't decided on his successor, but it seemed like Cao Pi had earned points with this act, proving that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. However, while Cao Cao was rampaging, the other warlords were AFK. Liu Bei had once suggested to Liu Biao that they take advantage of this opportunity to attack Cao Cao, but Biao didn't listen, and now all he could do was lament how strong Cao Cao's army had become. Liu Bei, since fleeing to Liu Biao, had become quite famous, even being appointed as a protector for Biao's eldest son, Liu Qi. This made him disliked by the 2 siblings, Lady Sai and Sai Mao, who were concubines of Liu Biao. If Liu Bei wasn't removed, Lady Sai's son, Liu Zong, wouldn't be able to inherit the throne. So the Sai siblings pretended to invite Liu Bei to a banquet to deal with him. Liu Bei attended, but he quickly discovered their plot and managed to escape by making a daring leap off a cliff on horseback without dying. On his way back, Liu Bei met a mysterious recluse who introduced himself as Shui Jing. Shui Jing told him that what Liu Bei lacked was vision. There were plenty of tanks and fighters, but no one to call the team. In reality, Shui Jing was planting the seeds for Liu Bei to meet the 2 famous strategists, Zhuge Liang, Ngoa Long, and Pang Tong, Fuang So. He hinted that with one of these 2, Liu Bei could secure the empire. When Liu Bei returned to Xinye, he met someone familiar to Shui Jing, Zhuge Liang's acquaintance, a strategist named Tu Shi. Though a bit flawed, he was better than nothing, so Liu Bei decided to recruit him. To Liu Bei's surprise, Tu Shi was incredibly capable, and with just 2,000 soldiers, he helped Liu Bei defeat 30,000 of Cao Cao's forces. But Cao Cao was still Cao Cao. When he couldn't control his son, he captured his mother as a hostage. Tu Shi, out of filial piety, had no choice but to leave Liu Bei. However, he promised to work as a civil servant under Cao Cao and even provided Liu Bei with Zhuge Liang's address. Liu Bei, following the lead, traveled to Longzhong to find Zhuge Liang 3 times. The first time, there was no one at home. The second time, Zhuge Liang was away on a trip. The third time, he was asleep. Understanding the importance of first impressions, Liu Bei didn't call out, but waited for hours for Zhuge Liang to wake up. It turned out that Zhuge Liang was only half Liu Bei's age, just over 20, but already had a reputation for his wisdom, and was described as having a beard that reached his chest. After a conversation, Liu Bei was completely captivated. It was like a country bumpkin finally getting enlightened. From that humble straw hut, the plan to divide China into 3 kingdoms was born. Zhuge Liang suggested that by taking control of southwest China and aligning with Sun Quan in the Wu Kingdom, they could defeat Cao Cao. The first step for Liu Bei was to seize Jingzhou from Liu Biao. Although Liu Bei was reluctant to fight his own family, even distant relatives, he realized that the more important task was recruiting Zhuge Liang. So Liu Bei brought out his ultimate weapon, crying. At first, Guan Yu and Zhang Fei didn't trust Zhuge Liang much, but Zhuge Liang quickly got the chance to prove himself by defeating Cao Cao's 100,000-strong army at Jingzhou. With only 3,000 men and a bit of fire from a temple, Liang managed to burn down Cao Cao's supply depot and push his forces back. Even though Cao Cao had attacked Jingzhou multiple times, his real goal was actually Sun Quan's territory, in the Wu Kingdom, to punish Sun Quan for refusing to send his son to Cao Cao as a hostage. The challenge for Cao Cao was that his northern troops were only good at fighting on land. They were useless on water. That's why Cao Cao wanted to seize Jingzhou, which had many experienced sailors to strengthen his naval forces. At this point in the story, things were looking good for Cao Cao, as after Liu Biao's death, his second son, Liu Zong, took power and surrendered to Cao Cao, hoping to gain strength to challenge his elder brother Liu Qi and Liu Bei. With the opportunity now in hand, Cao Cao agreed to deal with Liu Bei. This time, he sent 500,000 troops under the command of Xu Chu and Cao Ren. Zhuge Liang then used his strategic brilliance to outsmart Cao Cao's forces. He led them into a city that wasn't even there and cooked up an ambush that wiped out 100,000 of Cao Cao's men. Meanwhile, Liu Bei fled to the capital of Jingzhou, Xiangyang, but was denied entry by Sima Mao. Since Liu Bei was popular among the people, many citizens of Xiangyang abandoned the city to follow him. Liu Bei then sent Guan Yu and Zhuge Liang to seek help from Liu Qi in Jiangxia, while he followed with the group of refugees. But they were moving too slowly, so Cao Cao's cavalry caught up with them and crushed them at Changban. This is where the spotlight shines on Zhang Fei and Zhao Yun in the story. Zhao Yun, riding solo, dashed back and forth through Cao Cao's army. It sounded suicidal, but somehow he managed to find Liu Bei's family. The first round, he found Liu Bei's second wife, Madame Gan. The second round, he found his first wife, Madame Mai, but she was gravely wounded. She handed Liu Shan, their son, over to Zhao Yun, then committed suicide to avoid being a burden. Liu Shan, by the way, is the son of Liu Bei and Madame Gan, though it's Madame Mi who is holding him here. Anyway, Zhao Yun found the young prince, but the escape route was still unclear. Fortunately, Zhang Fei stood firm on a bridge and waited for Zhao Yun to pass by. With one mighty roar, Zhang Fei scared Cao Cao's troops into retreating. In reality, if they had rushed him, Zhang Fei probably would have died. But Cao Cao, being paranoid, thought it was a trap and called off the pursuit. When Zhao Yun returned with Liu Shan, Liu Bei was thrilled, but in his excitement, he threw his son to the ground for almost getting his general killed. It was a mess, but the key players were acknowledged. On the other hand, Cao Cao, realizing that Zhang Fei was just a reckless man, ordered his troops to chase again. But by then, Guan Yu had returned with reinforcements, and Team Liu Bei successfully made their way to Liu Qi's territory. Cao Cao had, however, achieved his goal of cornering Liu Bei and also gained control of the Jingzhou Navy, which would help him in his future campaign against Sun Quan. Upon receiving a letter from Cao Cao asking for surrender, Sun Quan called his advisors together to discuss whether they should fight or submit. All of them unanimously shouted, "Surrender." Only Lu Su remained loyal, advising against surrender. He analyzed that the only ones who would benefit from submission would be the officials, while Sun Quan would gain nothing. In the worst-case scenario, they might end up eliminated, like Liu Zong and his family. To convince Sun Quan, Lu Su invited Zhuge Liang for counsel. Despite the Sun family's hatred for those who followed Liu Biao, since Liu Biao had killed Sun Jian, they needed all the support they could get. Moreover, Zhuge Liang had intelligence on Cao Cao's forces. The truth was that Zhuge Liang outplayed the entire Wu court in the argument. Sun Quan then asked Zhuge Liang how many troops Cao Cao had. Lu Su had warned him not to answer, fearing that Sun Quan, still young, might be intimidated, but Zhuge Liang boldly answered, even doubling the numbers and praising Cao Cao's military strength. However, the bottom line was that they had to fight for justice. Zhuge Liang's goal was to appeal to Sun Quan's ego, and in the end, he succeeded. The final obstacle was Zhou Yu, sworn brother of Sun Qi, who had been advising Sun Quan to surrender. But Zhuge Liang simply smiled and outplayed him by mentioning that Cao Cao liked married women, suggesting that all they needed to do was offer the beautiful Qiao sisters from Jiangnan as tribute. The twist? The Qiao sisters were the wives of Zhou Yu and the widows of Sun Ce. Zhou Yu, furious, stopped pretending to support surrender. In fact, Zhou Yu had already been planning to go to war with Cao Cao and was just testing Zhuge Liang. Thus, the Sun-Liu alliance was formed to face Cao Cao at the Battle of Red Cliffs. This battle was basically like a heist movie. The forces were so uneven that Sun Quan and Liu Bei wanted to go for an all-out win without dragging it out. So 90% of this battle was all about preparation. Even though they were allies, Zhou Yu still tried to get rid of Zhuge Liang because he feared that in the future Zhuge Liang would become more important than him. Zhou Yu ordered Zhuge Liang to gather 100,000 arrows in just 3 days without providing any materials. So Zhuge Liang covered a few boats with straw, sailed out towards Cao Cao's forces on a foggy day, and the Cao army, afraid of an ambush, didn't engage and just shot arrows from a distance. In the end, more than 100,000 arrows got stuck in the straw, and Zhuge Liang completed his task. Seeing this, Zhou Yu was over it and went back to his work, not wanting to waste any more time. The new worry was Sima Mao, an experienced admiral who was currently training Cao Cao's soldiers in swimming. So Zhou Yu set up a fake letter on a table and tricked a Cao Cao messenger into stealing it for Cao Cao. The letter claimed that Sima Mao was a double agent, and Cao Cao immediately dealt with him. Then Zhou Yu planted Huang Gai in Cao Cao's army, publicly humiliating and torturing him before sending him away to make Cao Cao believe the act. At this point, Pang Tong, a brilliant strategist comparable to Zhuge Liang, appeared. He pretended to join Cao Cao's forces and suggested that they tie the ships together so that Cao Cao's soldiers wouldn't get seasick. Everything was going smoothly until Zhou Yu fell ill from stress. His original plan was to use fire tactics, which required favorable winds, but the wind was going against him at the time, so all the preparation seemed like it was for nothing. Luckily, Zhuge Liang set up a ritual altar and performed a ceremony, and just like that, the wind changed direction. It's unclear whether it was magic or something else, but that's how the story goes. Seeing this, Zhou Yu wasn't happy and immediately sent someone to arrest Zhuge Liang, fearing that this sorcerer would be a serious threat if left alive. But by the time they got there, Zhao Yun had already taken Zhuge Liang away. Back to the battle, Zhou Yu's plan went off smoothly. Huang Gai set the ships on fire, and the ships that were tied together were quickly engulfed by flames, spreading from one to another with no way to stop it. Then, Zhou Yu's fleet launched a full-scale attack, crushing Cao Cao's forces. Cao Cao managed to escape with a small group of guards, although he was ambushed by Wu's troops 3 times on the way. Still, he somehow managed to get to a seemingly safe place. Cao Cao laughed, mocking Zhuge Liang and Zhou Yu for not preparing an ambush. But as soon as he finished laughing, Zhao Yun appeared and forced Cao Cao to flee again. Then, Zhang Fei blocked his way, and finally Guan Yu stood in his path. Cao Cao begged Guan Yu to show mercy, reminding him of their past connection. Fortunately for Cao Cao, Guan Yu spared him, and he survived this devastating defeat. According to La's conspiracy theory, Zhuge Liang had consulted divination and knew that Cao Cao's time wasn't up yet. So, the fact that Guan Yu spared Cao Cao was part of the plan, allowing Guan Yu to clear his debt with Cao Cao. Moreover, Cao Cao's heavy defeat created the opportunity for the southern warlords to grow stronger. Once Cao Cao's main forces retreated to the north, Jingzhou seemed like an easy target. Since Wu had already done most of the work in the Battle of Red Cliffs, Zhou Yu claimed the right to take Jingzhou. Zhuge Liang agreed, but Zhou Yu ended up failing, and with Cao Cao's forces weakened in Jingzhou, Liu Bei swooped in and seized the entire region. Zhou Yu was so trolled by Zhuge Liang that his old wound reopened and started bleeding. During this time, Liu Bei also recruited some new faces, like Huang Zhong, who would later become one of the 5 tiger generals of Shu Han, and Wei Yan, who had killed his previous lord due to differing opinions. This made Zhuge Liang distrust Wei Yan. Zhuge Liang's plan to divide China into 3 seemed to be progressing well. With Jingzhou under his control, the next targets were Yizhou, controlled by Liu Qiang, and Hanzhong, held by Zhang Lu. However, Sun Quan had long coveted Jingzhou, especially since Liu Biao had killed Sun Jian in the past. Liu Bei also needed Jingzhou as a fallback route for attacking Cao Cao, and because the region was wealthy enough to support the underdeveloped western mountainous areas. Therefore, this piece of land was the biggest obstacle for the Sun-Liu alliance. Initially, Zhou Yu tried to use diplomacy to claim Jingzhou, continuing the argument that Liu Bei owed the Sun family for his role in the Battle of Red Cliffs. However, Liu Bei responded that he only served Liu Qi, the legitimate ruler of Jingzhou. After Liu Qi's death, Liu Bei said he would wait until he found another territory. Frustrated with Liu Bei's slippery responses, Zhou Yu hatched a plan to assassinate him. At the time, Liu Bei's wife had just passed away, so Zhou Yu invited Liu Bei to Wu to marry Sun Quan's younger sister. Zhuge Liang saw through the plot immediately and spread the word about Liu Bei's planned marriage, ensuring that everyone knew, making Sun Quan so embarrassed that he backed off from the assassination plan. This led to Liu Bei gaining Sun Quan's sister as his wife instead. Seeing that the Sun-Liu alliance was having problems, Cao Cao added fuel to the fire by appointing Zhou Yu and a few others as official administrators of Jingzhou. This pushed Zhou Yu to the brink, and he gathered his forces to attack Liu Bei, claiming he was going to help him attack Liu Zhang so that Liu Bei could relocate. But once again, Zhuge Liang saw through it. Liu Bei blocked Zhou Yu's advance and declared that Liu Zhang was part of the royal family and that no one could attack him. This not only avoided the ambush, but also earned Liu Zhang's trust. Zhou Yu, repeatedly outplayed by Zhuge Liang, was humiliated to the point that he died from the stress. With Zhou Yu out of the picture, Liu Bei not only removed a powerful opponent, but also gained new forces, as Pang Tong also joined Liu Bei during this period. Meanwhile, up north, Cao Cao executed Ma Teng, an accomplice in the edict about the belt. Ma Teng's son, Ma Chao, then teamed up with Han Sui and the Qiang tribes to seek revenge against Cao Cao. Ma Chao chased Cao Cao and forced him to retreat 3 times, even making him cut off his beard and discard his cloak to disguise himself. Honestly, Cao Cao was lucky to escape death by a hair's breadth multiple times. In the end, Ma Chao couldn't keep up the fight and was defeated by Cao Cao. He had to flee to Hanzhong and seek refuge with Zhang Lu. The western region was somewhat isolated with many natural barriers, making it a kind of separate realm where warlords didn't do much. Zhang Lu came from a family of Taoist priests and he ran his own temple in Hanzhong. His main rival was Liu Zhang, but Liu Zhang was weak and incompetent, with no trust from his subordinates. Even though he had more land and more troops, Liu Zhang had to send Zhang Tong to ask Cao Cao for help. Zhang Tong didn't like Liu Zhang and secretly offered to give Cao Cao the map of the western regions. Cao Cao rejected the offer and treated Zhang Tong poorly. On his way back, Zhang Tong passed through Liu Bei's territory and was treated very well, so he gave the map to Liu Bei instead. Liu Bei then moved into Yizhou, claiming he was there to protect Liu Zhang from Zhang Lu, but he didn't want to kill Liu Zhang due to their distant family ties. The situation changed when Sun Quan sent a letter to his sister asking her to bring Liu Shan back as a hostage. Fortunately, Zhang Fei and Zhao Yun stopped her in time. Sun Quan then spread fake news about Liu Bei to Liu Zhang, which led Liu Zhang to stop sending supplies and eventually ambush Liu Bei. Liu Bei managed to escape, but Pang Tong was killed. Despite being trapped between Liu Zhang and Zhang Lu, Liu Bei, with Zhuge Liang's guidance, was able to defeat both of them. During this time, Ma Chao also defected from Zhang Lu and joined Liu Bei in this battle. However, things got complicated because Liu Bei had mobilized too many troops in the western regions. Sun Quan sent Lu Su and Lu Meng to attack Jingzhou, leaving only Guan Yu to defend it. When Liu Bei heard the news, he rushed back to provide reinforcements. Seeing this, Cao Cao seized the opportunity to invade the western regions and take Hanzhong from Zhang Lu, planning to push further into Yizhou to trap Liu Bei. But Zhuge Liang managed to broker an agreement with Sun Quan to redistribute Jingzhou, tricking the Sun family into attacking He Fei to distract Cao Cao's forces. With that, Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang returned to the western regions to defeat Cao Cao in Hanzhong. At this point, Cao Cao had been promoted to the title of King of Wei, which made him just 1 rank below the emperor. So, when Liu Bei took Hanzhong, he declared himself King of Hanzhong as well. This move had significant symbolic meaning because Hanzhong was the first land Liu Bang, the founding emperor of the Han dynasty, had taken. Essentially, Liu Bei was following in his ancestors' footsteps to solidify his legitimacy. The 5 Tiger generals were officially appointed, including Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, Ma Chao, and Huang Zhong. However, Guan Yu wasn't happy because he was now on par with the older Huang Zhong, even though Guan Yu himself was already 60 years old. Cao Cao, now in power, suggested to Sun Quan that they collaborate to take Jingzhou. Sun Quan hesitated and asked if Guan Yu would be willing to marry his daughter to his son. Guan Yu, growing more arrogant with age, replied that the child of a tiger would never marry the child of a dog. This insult pushed the alliance between Cao Cao and Sun Quan forward, and Guan Yu sealed his own fate. However, he did manage to have a brief moment of triumph. Following Zhuge Liang's advice, Guan Yu led an army to attack Cao Cao's forces, killing several important generals and severely damaging their morale. Guan Yu was clearly dominating until Sun Quan appointed a strategist named Lu Xun to lead the forces. Lu Xun, a little-known figure, wasn't even on Guan Yu's radar, and Guan Yu underestimated him. This allowed Lu Meng to seize some of the cities in Jingzhou. Lu Meng was much more skilled than Guan Yu and quickly won the trust of the local population. This marked the beginning of Guan Yu's downfall. With a shortage of food and many soldiers deserting, Guan Yu asked for help from Liu Bei's adopted son, Liu Feng, but was refused. Guan Yu tried to retreat to Liu Bei's stronghold in the west, but was captured by Sun Quan's forces and executed. His horse, Red Hair, died a few days later from refusing to eat. Then came a series of fantastical events like Guan Yu's ghost haunting Lu Meng to death and blood flowing from the trees. After executing Guan Yu, Sun Quan surrendered to Cao Cao for protection against Liu Bei. Cao Cao was fine with this, but he didn't want to get too involved. When Sun Quan sent Guan Yu's head to him, Cao Cao staged a very elaborate funeral. But not long after, Cao Cao himself followed his old friend to the grave due to a brain tumor. When Cao Cao's son, Cao Pi, ascended the throne, he deposed and persecuted the Han emperor, declaring himself emperor and founding the Wei dynasty. Seeing this, Liu Bei proclaimed himself the Emperor of Han, based in Shu, which is why it is commonly called Shu Han. As emperor, Liu Bei's first order was to attack Wu. Liu Bei was letting personal grudges take precedence over the duty of punishing the usurper. This was not a wise move for a ruler, and in reality it marked the beginning of a series of tragedies. Zhuge Liang couldn't stop him, as Zhang Fei constantly provoked him. Ironically, Zhang Fei became the first victim of this war. Before even leaving for battle, he was killed by his subordinates due to his mistreatment of the soldiers. The culprit fled to Wu, which further enraged Liu Bei. Liu Bei took command himself, bringing along his generals Guan Xing, Zhang Bao, and the sons of Guan Yu and Zhang Fei, with an army of 700,000, seemingly unstoppable. At this time, Wu's forces were still led by Lu Xun. Lu Xun's strategy was to delay and buy time until summer. Liu Bei, too eager, moved his camp to an area with more shade, unaware that the trees were highly flammable. By the time Zhuge Liang learned of it, it was too late. Lu Xun set fire to the forest, decimating almost all of Liu Bei's army. Zhuge Liang managed to arrive just in time to hold off Lu Xun and save Liu Bei. However, Lu Xun was not interested in pursuing Liu Bei because Cao Wei had switched sides, attacking instead of assisting the Sun family. As a result, Sun Quan decided to break away and establish his own Wu dynasty. At this point, Liu Bei was too ill to move, having lost 2 brothers and failed to exact his revenge. He no longer had the will to live. The dream of restoring the Han dynasty was passed on to Zhuge Liang. Liu Bei told him that if Liu Shan was worthy, he should serve him. If not, Zhuge Liang could usurp the throne himself. After saying this, Liu Bei passed away, meeting with his 2 brothers in the afterlife. Liu Bei's last words to Zhuge Liang were, "By the way, don't trust Ma Su." Zhuge Liang was puzzled but decided not to dwell on it, as he had much larger problems at hand. The 5 enemy armies were closing in on Shu Han, all masterminded by Sima Yi, the final and greatest rival of Zhuge Liang. Liu Shan had just become the new emperor, but before he could catch his breath, Shu Han was attacked by 5 armies. Clearly, someone as weak as Liu Shan couldn't survive on his own without Zhuge Liang taking care of everything. At this point in the story, Zhuge Liang becomes the central figure. Psychological factors, diplomacy, terrain, and various other variables come into play more than before. The focus now shifts to political figures sending letters instead of fighting directly. Unlike the battle-hardened warriors from previous parts of the story, Zhuge Liang has a more comprehensive view of war, with a deeper understanding of alliances and their complexities. Even with 5 armies at Shu's doorstep, Zhuge Liang remains unfazed. He knows that this massive force is actually very disorganized, each leader driven by their own selfish goals. The Kuang tribes from Liangzhou respect the Ma family, so Ma Chao is sent to block this army, making the Kuang hesitate. The Southern Man tribes are easily swayed by a few tricks, so Wei Yan is given orders to deploy a deceptive force to scare them. If they don't know what to do, the Southern Man tribes won't act at all. Wei has 2 armies. One is led by Meng Da, a friend of someone working in Shu. Zhuge Liang asks his friend to send a letter urging Meng Da not to fight, and so Meng Da pretends to be sick and stays inactive. The main force is stopped by Zhao Yun at a pass that is easy to defend, but hard to attack. The final army from Wu will only act if the others make progress. This is because Wu doesn't trust Wei after they were betrayed during the last alliance. With this lack of cooperation, it's clear that the Wei-Wu alliance won't hold. In fact, Wei even turns on Wu after the alliance dissolves. As for Zhuge Liang, before engaging in a major battle, he still has some housework to attend to, like pacifying the south and subduing the Southern Man tribes. The leader of the Southern Man, Meng Huo, is captured and released 7 times by Zhuge Liang. On the 8th time, he submits. Zhuge Liang also sets up an autonomous region for the Southern Man. This is an example of the saying, "Win people over with virtue." With kindness, the Southern Man stopped causing trouble and lived peacefully with the Shu people. There's an interesting story related to this. On his way back from the south, Zhuge Liang encounters a massive storm. He is advised to sacrifice 49 heads of the Southern Man to calm the storm, but Zhuge Liang refuses, and instead uses wrapped animal meat for the ritual. And it works, in the story. This is also the legend of the creation of the baozi, steamed bun with meat filling, also known as mantou in Chinese. Now, Zhuge Liang can focus on the north. He writes a memorial to commemorate Liu Bei and launches the northern campaign. Shu declares itself the rightful heir to the Han dynasty, which was overthrown by Wei, so a conflict is unavoidable. Wei's territory in the Central Plains is vast, with a booming economy and control of the Silk Road. Over time, Wei becomes increasingly powerful, so Zhuge Liang has no choice but to attack Wei as soon as possible. The main obstacle is Sima Yi. Zhuge Liang slanders Sima Yi as a traitor, leading the Wei emperor at the time Cao Rui to remove Sima Yi from his position. But even this is not easy, as 4 of the 5 tiger generals are dead, leaving only Zhao Yun, who is over 70 years old. The rest are inexperienced generals, including Wei Yan, who is a bit crazy. Wei Yan even wants to attack Chang'an directly, but Zhuge Liang refuses. Zhuge Liang's plan goes smoothly until he encounters a young Wei general, Jiang Wei. Jiang Wei captures some of Zhuge Liang's troops and even manages to push back Zhao Yun. Zhuge Liang admires his abilities and decides to take Jiang Wei as his disciple. Although it was a bit tricky, he eventually succeeds. Zhuge Liang also treats captured soldiers well, so many of them surrender without a fight. In response, Wei sends Cao Ren and Wang Lang to deal with the situation. Wang Lang curses Zhuge Liang for going against Wei, saying he's defying fate. Zhuge Liang counters, calling the Cao family usurpers of the Liu family and the Wei officials traitors. Wang Lang, who is old and about to die, is scolded by Zhuge Liang, which leads him to die in shame. However, the war quickly turns around. Zhuge Liang's insider, Meng Da, is discovered and dealt with by Sima Yi. The most feared figure on the Wei side has returned to the game. Now, Zhuge Liang has to secure the supply line in the west, and Ma Su volunteers for the task. Zhuge Liang senses something is wrong but agrees anyway. This turns out to be the biggest mistake of Zhuge Liang's career. Simplifying Ma Su, he was an overly confident young man who, when facing the experienced General Zhang Xu of Wei, was quickly defeated. This opened the path for Sima Yi to approach Zhuge Liang's base. But when Sima Yi arrived, he only saw Zhuge Liang sitting and playing his guqin on the city walls, with all 4 city gates wide open and the inside completely empty. Sima Yi suspected a trap and ordered a retreat. As he turned back, Sima Yi heard the war drums of Shu, which made him believe he had foiled an ambush. But just days later, news came that Zhuge Liang had actually retreated. His campaign had truly collapsed after the failure of Meisu. Only a few thousand soldiers remained in the city to face 50,000 troops from Wei. Sima Yi sighed and admitted that he was no match for Zhuge Liang. However, this was the closest Shu had ever been to victory against Wei. From the Second Northern Campaign onward, Zhuge Liang no longer had any of his famous generals, as Zhao Yun had also died of old age after returning from the first campaign. Ultimately, Zhuge Liang's second campaign failed due to a lack of supplies. By the third campaign, he allied with Wu to create a pincer movement, but Wu eventually betrayed the plan, resulting in failure, and Zhang Bao died during this campaign. Even the best-laid plans couldn't keep Wei from eventually fighting back, but due to terrain and weather, Wei could not press further and was forced to retreat, giving Zhuge Liang the opportunity to launch his fourth campaign. He struck at the rear of Wei's forces, landing a heavy blow, and ended the battle by sending an insulting letter to Cao Ren, causing him to die in anger. Unfortunately, Zhuge Liang was called back to Chengdu because Sima Yi had spread rumors that Zhuge Liang was planning to rebel. This was when Zhuge Liang realized that the imperial court had been overtaken by eunuchs and corrupt officials. Shu Han had fallen victim to the same internal decay that had destroyed the Han dynasty they were trying to restore. In reality, only Zhuge Liang was still fighting for that cause, as no one else in Shu seemed to care anymore. The story grew darker from here. After lying dormant for 3 years to prepare, Zhuge Liang launched his final campaign, despite numerous bad omens and the death of Guanxing. He stubbornly continued to honor his promise to Liu Bei. Zhuge Liang and Sima Yi had fought for so long that they knew each other too well. So Sima Yi switched to a defensive strategy, simply waiting and outlasting Zhuge Liang. But one day, Sima Yi received intelligence that the enemy camp was lax in its defense. He immediately seized the opportunity to attack, only to walk straight into a trap set by Zhuge Liang. Sima Yi and his sons were tricked into a narrow, flammable valley, thinking they were doomed. But it was as if heaven was protecting them. A sudden storm extinguished the flames, saving Sima Yi and his sons. They quickly retreated back to the city and shut themselves off from further engagement with Zhuge Liang. Zhuge Liang knew that if Sima Yi didn't come out, there was no way to fight, so he mocked and provoked Sima Yi every day, even sending him a woman's dress to wear. But Sima Yi, shameless as ever, didn't care. One day, when a Shu envoy arrived to insult Sima Yi again, he asked, "How is Zhuge Liang doing?" The envoy replied, "He stays up late, wakes up early, works all day, and eats very little." Sima Yi thought to himself, "At this rate, he'll die soon." Soon after, Zhuge Liang's camp began to withdraw farther and farther. Initially, Sima Yi was cautious and didn't act hastily. But when he was almost certain that Zhuge Liang had died, he immediately ordered an attack. However, when Sima Yi reached the camp, he found the Shu forces were fully prepared for battle. Zhuge Liang was still sitting on the hill. At that moment, Sima Yi ordered his troops to retreat, and many of his soldiers were trampled to death in the chaos. A few days later, Sima Yi realized that this was yet another trap. The Zhuge Liang he saw on the hill was a decoy, and the real Zhuge Liang had died, but he had still outsmarted Sima Yi. Before his death, Zhuge Liang had planned in detail to ensure the safe retreat of the Shu army. He passed on the design for the repeating crossbow to Jiang Wei, named his successors, and even prepared secret plans for them to carry out, such as ordering Ma Dai to eliminate Wei Yan if he rebelled. Many adaptations of the story stop here because the last 15 chapters of the novel are very melancholic. But if you want to know how Romance of the Three Kingdoms truly ends, keep watching the video. After outliving Zhuge Liang, Sima Yi went on to conquer the last warlord in the north, Gong Sun Kang. His influence in the Wei court grew stronger. When Cao Rui passed away, Sima Yi became the regent for the young new emperor Cao Feng. The Cao family also appointed Cao Ren's son, Cao Shuang, as co-regent, a move aimed at balancing power. Cao Shuang, however, did not like Sima Yi because Yi often insulted his father, calling him a fool. So Cao Shuang resorted to political maneuvers to isolate Sima Yi, forcing him to feign illness and step down, along with his sons. Wei's policy of valuing talent created a toxic work environment. Everyone tried to outshine each other to gain more credit, which eventually turned into political scheming and backstabbing. The final 15 chapters of the story feel like a long, depressing road. The once great generals are gone, the brilliant strategists have disappeared, and the epic battles are no more. The focus of the story shifts entirely to the power struggles within the court. After 105 chapters of rising action where empires were built, we finally enter the downward spiral as the very ideals these characters fought for caused the collapse of the nations they worked so hard to establish. After a 10-year time skip, the image of a sickly, frail Sima Yi emerges. Cao Shuang had sent people to monitor him, to ensure he posed no threat. But one day, in 240, when Cao Shuang's men had just left, Sima Yi jumped out of bed and launched a coup. Cao Shuang was at the royal mausoleum with the emperor, so the palace had few guards. Sima Yi easily took control of the imperial palace and offered Cao Shuang the chance to surrender peacefully. Sima Yi promised to only strip Cao Shuang of his military authority. However, once Cao Shuang surrendered, his entire family was executed. History seemed to repeat itself as Sima Yi turned the Wei emperor into his puppet. The Cao family was reduced to just a facade for Sima Yi's rule. Cao Cao once said, "I would rather betray others than let them betray me." But in the end, it was his descendants who allowed Sima Yi to betray them. Of course, many remained loyal to the Cao family, and it would take time for Sima Yi to fully consolidate power. His coup also led to the defection of Xiahou Ba to Shu, bringing with him the general Jiang Wei, who immediately began attacking Wei. In fact, this was Jiang Wei's fourth campaign. After Zhuge Liang's death, Jiang Wei continued to launch campaigns against Wei in honor of his mentor. His perseverance and respect for Zhuge Liang's legacy are commendable, but these costly campaigns drained Shu's resources. Meanwhile, the Shu emperor, Liu Shan, was no different than a puppet, spending most of his time wasting money and befriending corrupt officials and eunuchs. Historically, Jiang Wei failed 11 times, but in the novel, the count is reduced to 9. The once proud reputation of Shu Han for brotherhood and loyalty had turned into blind loyalty. Sima Yi passed away a few years after the coup. His sons, Sima Shi and Sima Zhao, continued to control the emperor. 1 year after Sun Quan's death, Wei seized the opportunity to attack Wu but failed. The three kingdoms were at a stalemate for quite some time. The battles fought by the mediocre generals were rather dull, often seen as mere formalities with no real impact. The next generation of Wei had two prominent figures, Deng Ai and Zheng Hui, but they didn't really spark much interest. Wu also had its own problems after Sun Quan's death. The person in charge was Jia Xu, a cousin of Zhuge Liang, but he was ruthless and was assassinated by his political opponents. The loyal followers of the Sun family became cruel officials. In Wei, the emperor tried to eliminate Sima Shi through a secret decree, but the conspiracy was discovered, mirroring what had happened to Cao Cao decades earlier. The emperor was overthrown and replaced by another puppet ruler, just before Sima Shi passed away soon after from an illness. As for Shu, Jiang Wei continued his string of failures. Deng Ai, who defended against Jiang Wei, quickly rose through the ranks, as did Zhong Hui, who defended against Wu forces in the east. During this period, many Wu officials defected to Shu and Wei because the new chancellor Sun Lin was extremely cruel and tyrannical. Lin overthrew the second emperor of Wu, Sun Liang, and replaced him with Sun Shu. But Sun Shu was no better, initiating a coup and executing Sun Lin. The family values of the Sun family had crumbled by this point. In the west, Jiang Wei finally made some progress, winning a battle by using Zhuge Liang's formation. However, just after the victory, he was called back by Huang Hao, the favored eunuch of Liu Shan, who had taken bribes from Wei. Jiang Wei was often recalled at the last minute during his campaigns, much like how the eunuchs of the Han dynasty had dug the grave for Shu Han's downfall. If you think it's time to end this misery, so did Sima Zhao. He mobilized forces and sent his best generals Deng Ai and Zhong Hui to attack Shu. However, these generals had enough power to potentially rebel, especially Zhong Hui, who was quite ambitious. Jiang Wei caught on to this and immediately requested reinforcements, but Huang Hao refused, thinking it was just an excuse for a coup. By this point, even if Zhuge Liang came back from the dead, it wouldn't help, so he only appeared in a dream to Zhong Hui. In the dream, Zhuge Liang said that the mandate of heaven was lost and asked Zhong Hui to show mercy to the people of Shu. This campaign can be simplified as follows. Zhong Hui and Jiang Wei stalemated while Deng Ai attacked Chengdu. Liu Shan sent Zhuge Liang's son to lead the army against the enemy, but the son was nothing compared to his father. He was quickly defeated and had to commit suicide out of shame. In 264, Shu Han collapsed. Liu Shan surrendered to Deng Ai, and Jiang Wei surrendered to Zhong Hui. However, Jiang Wei didn't give up and continued his efforts, even though the emperor couldn't care less. Jiang Wei pretended to swear loyalty to Zhong Hui and encouraged him to rebel and establish his own dynasty. Zhong Hui believed him and arrested Deng Ai, but he didn't have the support of the soldiers. When they swore loyalty to him, they rebelled and killed Zhong Hui instead. Jiang Wei suffered a heart attack and died in the chaos. Deng Ai was also assassinated on his way back to the Wei capital. Liu Shan, on the other hand, lived a comfortable life until the end, as a minor noble under Sima Zhao's control. Liu Shan's good treatment was actually meant to encourage Wu's eventual surrender. After Sima Zhao died, his son, Sima Yan, succeeded him. Like Cao Cao, Sima Zhao didn't proclaim himself emperor to maintain stability, but he had already set everything up for his son to take the throne. In 266, Sima Yan deposed the Wei emperor and declared himself emperor, establishing the Jin dynasty. Sima Yi was posthumously honored as the founder of the Jin dynasty. After several years of preparation, Jin launched an attack on Wu. At the time, the Wu emperor Sun Hao was cruel and corrupt, certainly not the kind of ruler anyone wanted to protect. So, when the Jin army approached the Wu capital, only the chancellor, Zhang Di, and his men rushed out to resist. Zhang Di believed that if they lost, no one would defend the country, which would be shameful. And he was right. After his defeat, Sun Hao surrendered, even kneeling and licking the shoes of Sima Yan. The Three Kingdoms period ended with the Jin dynasty of the Sima family emerging victorious. The last 15 chapters of the story completely dismantled everything that had been built up before. The rise of an empire, the fall of an empire. Romance of the Three Kingdoms describes the joy of building an empire, the difficulty of maintaining it, and the brutal collapse that follows. It's not surprising that most adaptations skip over this part, but it's truly a vital section of Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Each of the Three Kingdoms represents a piece of history, and the foundational ideals of these kingdoms often became the reason for the downfall of many Chinese dynasties. For example, the openness and ethnic diversity of the Tang dynasty contributed to it being considered the most successful dynasty in Chinese history, but it also led to the An Lushan rebellion, led by a Turkic general from the Gokturks. No system or policy is perfect. Things rise and fall, unite and divide. Everyone tries to build their own empire and ideals.